Yo, welcome back, Leaders Live. Charlie Stevens, your host. Excited for today's show. We got Matt Britton, CEO of SUZY, on the show today. It's going to be a good one. He is a keynote speaker. He is a wonderful founder who's grown a few businesses and made an exit or two. So he's going to be pretty exciting. Before we bring in Matt, we're going to bring in Michael Mara, our partner, our supporting partner from Entre, to introduce himself. Mike, how you doing?
Hey Charlie, what's going on? Glad to be here for another Leaders Live episode.
Good to see you, man. So talk a little bit about Entre, hype it up. Just had the launch. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that's right. We launched it publicly at the beginning of October. We have a lot of awesome people already joining. We have almost 10,000 people now on the app. So that's awesome. We're doing a ton of cool events. And we have a lot of interesting features coming out that we'll be announcing soon to help with networking online, where you can actually instantly connect and meet new people. So super excited about that. We have a lot of cool events going on. We have a Funders and Founders happy hour later today as well at 6 o'clock. So if anyone wants that, I'll be throwing it out in the chat here. And super excited for this interview with Matt. And if anyone is interested in connecting with other entrepreneurs, investors, freelancers, they can just sign up on Entre for free at joinentre.com. I'll be hanging out in the background here, keeping tabs on all of the questions coming in. So if you're watching on whatever, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever you're watching this, drop some questions in the chat. I'll be there as well to reply back, and we'll do a quick Q&A at the end with Matt as well. And I'm super excited for this. So thanks, Charlie, and really looking forward to this interview with Matt.
Very cool. And be sure to drop your name in the comments, whether it's on YouTube or LinkedIn. Say hello. Use that comment bar as the network to meet each other and connect with each other. So Mike will do the Q&A later on. Ask some questions in there, and Mike will ask your question at the end of the show, right around 3:30, 3:40 or so. Before we bring in Matt, our guest, just a little reason why we're doing the show. We want to understand why business leaders operate, connect with them, and hopefully connect them with other like-minded individuals. Once we understand what they do, what they're building, then we'll have the opportunity to connect them and grow together. We're all in this together. In it together is a nice little mantra that LinkedIn has. Like to steal that as well. So without further ado, let's bring in Matt Britton, CEO, founder of SUZY. Matt, welcome. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. Really excited.
Absolutely. Matt, you are a international keynote speaker, also author of Youth Nation, which was #1 on Amazon. You are the leading expert in millennial generation and a marketing expert. So I'm excited, a lot of questions here. So let's kind of just jump into this. Give a little context of where you started with your marketing background. It looks like you came right out of college.
Yeah.
And started this before, and then we'll get into SUZY and what you're building at SUZY.
Sure. I mean, my entree into the marketing promotion space was when I was a nightclub promoter during college at Boston University. From there, I started a small company right out of college, originally built to help small businesses target, the college audience. And then from there, I started my first agency in 2002 called Mr. Youth, which I ended up building for about a 14-year period before it was acquired.
So Mr. Youth, MRY, I'm assuming that's what this stands for?
Yeah, Mr. Youth was renamed later as MRY as we expanded beyond the youth audience.
Okay. So let's talk about SUZY. SUZY, customer intelligence platform, known as the Siri for brands, validating critical assumptions. Tell us a little bit more about the business. I'd like to do it myself, but I'm sure you could justify it a little bit better.
Sure. So SUZY is a software company, and we service large enterprise customers who leverage the SUZY platform to gain access to our network of over 1 million US consumers to power real-time decision-making. Customers can log on to the SUZY platform ask any type of consumer a question in a variety of different formats, and get instant on-demand answers and feedback to power business decisions. So you basically have the consumers that matter to you accessible at all times to make sure you're not making any assumptions and that you really understand what the consumer is thinking before you make a business decision that could impact them.
And when you say validate critical assumptions, I guess the question I had for you is, what are some of the most important questions you ask a potential client when they give you, a set of data and they say, we want to validate this? What are the questions that you're asking your clients?
So clients actually enter their questions right into the SUZY system. Okay. And the questions that they will enter will be, what design of, this new t-shirt do you like better? How much would you pay for this new deodorant? What social media post do you think people would respond better to? So basically, would you buy a new lemon lime flavored chewing gum from us? Companies are making a tons of decisions during the product development life cycle, whether it's what product to make, how to package it, how to price it, where to sell it, how to promote it. And along the path, instead of companies making decisions in a vacuum, they can do so with the help of their customers or the consumers that matter most.
So it sounds like you're taking that inbound almost and then using it as a reach out to follow up with them. Is that correct?
Are you talking about the way that clients use SUZY?
Yeah.
It's a market research tool. So customers use SUZY to conduct market research. They are conducting research just like you would traditionally do through a market research agency. We put out a poll or a survey. You can do that on SUZY, except the only difference is you're doing it yourself and you're getting instant feedback.
Right. And some of the clients that you guys are working with, brands are testing the concepts. You said private equity groups that are conducting the due diligence process. And I'm taking this from your website as well.
Yeah.
Which is a very cool website. And then also, broadcast networks that are trying to win more pitches and test concepts. What can you give us like a case study of someone that's reached out to you and you've had a good win that you've shared possibly with somebody who's kind of looking at SUZY to potentially pick up as and work with?
So, we work with over 250 enterprise customers, some of the largest companies in the world. We had a customer last year that tested a variety of different Super Bowl spots before they ran a TV spot during the Super Bowl. We have companies that are using SUZY to figure out what store their products would be most effective in selling their product in. It really goes across the board. I can't share how our customers are using SUZY specifically because frankly, that's none of my business. They're using the platform to conduct their own research, but we are working with some of the biggest companies in the world to do so.
And let's talk about that partnership aspect of it and the people that you're working with. How are you getting these giant Fortune 500 name brands? A lot of these people potentially watching are startups and they're just trying to get their first client. But how do you kind of build up a client?
I've been in business for a long time. So when we were first getting started, it was through existing relationships that people I'd worked with in the past through my ad agency or other places. I leaned into those relationships at the beginning because when you're first getting started, you really need to, have people take a leap of faith on you and to trust you as a person versus the product if they're going to give you business. Over time, we proved the value of the product. And as we grew and got more customers, we were able to raise more investment dollars, which allowed us to hire more salespeople. And now we have a full-time army of over 30 salespeople that are working for our company, performing various different functions, whose job it is ultimately to bring in new customers, as well as we have a customer success team whose job is it to ensure that our customers who are using the SUZY platform are getting the most value out of it as possible, and they can continue to not only use SUZY, but expand their use of SUZY.
Yeah, and the relationship is something I definitely want to touch on in a little bit, but the growth aspect of you building out SUZY, you've built out Mr. Youth before too, from 1 to 500 people.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the stages of growing out the company? Because I'm sure that there's different pivot points and tipping points, whether it be, first seed stage or the growth stage or whatever it is, but can you talk about how you got to 500, like the ups and downs possibly?
Yeah, my business now, SUZY, is a completely different business than the ad agency business I was in prior. In the ad agency business, you can sell yourself. So if clients like you as an individual, they will pay your agency to have access to you and your thinking and your ideas. That makes it a little bit easier to get your business off the ground. The problem is it's less scalable because you can only be in so many places at a time. And over time, you have to bring on more people who your clients will trust. With our software company, it's a lot different. It's much harder to get it off the ground because you have to create something called product market fit. You need to create a software product that companies will be willing to pay for. Once you achieve that, however, the business becomes incredibly more scalable because you essentially are optimizing one thing over and over again, and you're charging a variety of different clients to pay for that thing. In terms of different stages of a business, I mean, to oversimplify it, there's really 3 stages. The first stage is really what I'll call the bootstrapping phase, where it's just you and maybe a couple other people, and you're doing all the work yourself. You're trying to sell the product, build the product, manage the customers, market the product, etc. The second stage is sort of like you have a close-knit family. So you'll go from 3 people to say 20 or 25. And usually those initial hires are people who you know or you've worked with in the past. You still, as a founder, are still very much involved in most decision making because you know everyone that's working for you, and you're small enough where you can afford to get your hands in the weeds in a lot of different places. The third phase, however, is where a lot of companies struggle, which is, you know, where you need to scale, where you need to go from 25 employees to 50 or 100 or 200 employees. And when you do that, you're not only hiring people who can do the work, but you're hiring people that can manage other people to do the work. And you have to build layers, and you have to build systems and processes to be able to scale an organization. And that takes a completely new skill set. And not everyone can get to that third phase, and not everyone is sort of cut out to get to that third phase. I think a lot of people now are jumping into being an entrepreneur because, you know, they see Mark Zuckerberg and they think it's cool, but the reality is it can be lonely. It takes a lot of work, and you know, it's a real grind to get to a place where it makes sense to run your own business versus just working for someone else.
Yeah, the effectively managing a group of people is interesting to me. I mean, how do you look at management in growing this team and like making sure that they're on the right track, and then everybody is effectively communicating whatever the product is or the software?
I mean, we invest a lot in training to make sure that the people who we bring on are trained well and they understand what we're trying to accomplish as a business and the attributes of our product. We try to bring on people that take initiative on their own. So my experience is the best people who work at organizations are people who have initiative, people that don't wait to be told what to do, but people who grab opportunities that they see that they can improve the company they're at, and they just go for it. And not everyone, you know, is built to have initiative, but those that do, if you can find them, you really need to empower them, give them the tools and resources they need to succeed for your company, and just get out of their way. That's been how I've been successful. It's finding those people, empowering them, taking care of them, giving them what they need and getting out of their way. And then your business starts to scale in many different ways that you never thought it would, because you have other people thinking about it for you. It's not just incumbent upon, you know, yourself.
Yeah. That's super helpful. I think that's super helpful for everyone who's watching here. When you're talking about scaling as well, that kind of leads back to the growth with venture capital, raising capital and whatnot. For founders or whoever is watching, when it talks about the raising capital aspect of it, how did you go about that? Because you've had a couple rounds, a couple different ways to do it. But how would you advise somebody who's going to raise some capital, what strategies to look at and which way to go?
Well, I mean, there's various phases of building an organization, there's various phases to raising capital. If you're first starting out, unless you're an entrepreneur who's already built and sold the company, or you're somebody who used to work at Google or Facebook, who you probably have a big network of people who will invest. Normally, when you're first starting out, you need to lean into friends and family for seed investments, just, you know, or you basically have to use your own savings, whatever you can, to be able to have that sort of, you know, minimum viable product that you can actually, we call MVP, that you can push out. And again, it also depends upon what business you're in. When I ran my ad agency, I didn't raise $1 of venture capital, because when you have a service business, you're selling yourself. You don't need to have the R&D and capital investment necessarily that would facilitate venture capital dollars. You really only need venture capital investments if you're more of a technology business where there's significant upfront, you know, investment where you're going to be building a product. If that's the case, you need to raise money. Again, the first phase is really a friends and family round or a seed round to get the product off the ground, create that minimally viable product. Then you need to get at least a couple customers on it that are using it, show traction with those customers, and then you can go raise your A or early stage round where you can raise a couple $1 million to hire people, improve the product, bring it to market to win more customers. And not until you've won then maybe 10, 20, 30, 100 customers, depending upon the type of product you have, can you go out and raise a significant growth-oriented round, a B or C round, that really allows you to raise tens of millions of dollars to really go out and scale the company. So there's multiple different phases. A lot of people want to jump to a phase that they're not ready for, and that could obviously have very disparaging results in the end.
Right. And then looking at aligned investors, I mean, how did you go about the strategy of looking at maybe a list, or did you create a list? And how did you be hyper specific of the investors that probably would help you along the line, not just give you money, but also add value to your company?
Yeah, I mean, SUZY's in a very hot space that has heavily invested in right now, which is the SaaS category, software as a service. And more specifically, we are in the consumer insight space, which is a particularly hot space within the SaaS category. And there are no shortage of companies that are competing in our space. And because of that, there's no shortage of investors and types of investors that we can look at that essentially create the right archetype or roadmap on who to go after to try to raise capital. We were fortunate enough to get a great lead investor very early on in the origins of the business called Foundry Group. And once you get the validation of a prominent venture capitalist, it kind of becomes slightly easier to get follow-on venture capitalists to join and invest in later stages, but not if you're not showing the right unit economics and progress as a company. So ultimately, you want to get to a point where investors are clamoring to invest in you versus you're trying to clamor to get investor dollars. My experience is that it's very hard, if not impossible, to kind of sell somebody on bringing you money. Your numbers and your product has to sell itself. And then you'll have no shortage of companies and outside investors that want to invest in your business.
Absolutely, built a little bit of buzz. Seems like you're doing a pretty good job at that. Switching gears a little bit, the networking aspect of this, we're partners with Michael Mara, Entre. He's got a networking group of entrepreneurs. You were the CEO of Summit Series back in 2016, which is like the prominent networking group. You go out to Colorado, it seems like everybody's having a party and doing deals. What makes like a valuable networking event where people are actually leading to business and transactions and relationships down the road?
I think you need to bring the right people together that have either a shared goal or shared values, first and foremost. You can't just piecemeal people together in an opportunistic way, because you might be bringing the people together that don't have a lot in common. And then when you do that, it's really hard to facilitate the right type of environment. I think you need to disarm people, put them in a place where they're willing to share information, share ideas. And then over time, networking kind of occurs naturally. What I don't think works is sort of like forced networking events where people are speed networking or handing out their cards. That sort of artificial networking never really tends to work. I think you have to work hard to build a platform that makes people feel at ease and comfortable, work hard to build the right group of people that are coming together, that again facilitates the free flow of information and ideas and ultimately relationships.
You're talking about disarming people in that networking group and making everybody feel comfortable. I mean, how do you do that, I guess, as a host? And then how do you kind of, jump into it as someone who's networking hypothetically and, building those?
I mean, you really need to first of all, again, I think you need to bring them together with a shared interest, something that they all have in common, that they all believe in. Could it be a musical artist? Sure. But if it's really around a problem that they all want to solve, that's even better. So if you bring people together that really are trying to solve the problem of how to raise money or how to learn, how to do social media better for your business or whatever it may be, and they really have all expressed an interest in that topic, then if you deliver content that's really engaging, not one way where it's 4 people on a panel and everyone, but like something that's engaging, getting multiple people to participate and be involved, that's how you sort of disarm people. You need to drive participation and engagement at an event. It can't be linear where everyone's just staring at, 1 or 2 people who are talking the whole time. Once you do that, you really start to create, more of a familiar vibe that gets people, I think, more open to, conversing with one another.
Yeah, it's almost finding that common theme, it sounds like, so that people all relate and open up a little bit. That's good. That's valuable. Definitely a gem. You're dropping gems all over the place. You're a fast talker. I like it. We're making a lot of progress.
Nice.
Future opportunities. Website says you're always staying ahead of the curve for your clients. What's next for SUZY? You know, what opportunities are you looking to grow into? I ask this because anybody who's watching or will watch this on the replay, listen to our podcast, if they hear this, they say, all right, Matt's doing this, maybe I got that, and we can collaborate for the future.
Yeah, I mean, at SUZY, speaking for our company at SUZY, we have a pretty solid roadmap and a pretty good idea of where we want to take the company into 2021 and beyond. We spend a good deal of time listening to our customers and their needs and making sure that we're building a product that is continuing not only to deliver on their needs, but break new ground in the world of consumer insights. We are working on new technologies and things like machine learning and building APIs to really be able to stretch our product's tentacles into a variety of different touch points within the enterprise workplace to make it easier and to share our data that is being generated from the tools and also drive collaboration. I think collaboration right now is something that all large enterprises are trying to figure out in this new remote workforce that we're suddenly faced with. And if SUZY can be, a central connective tissue that allows companies to uncover insights about their consumer, easily share it with one another, collaborate on those insights to make collective business decisions, then we're going to be able to win. And that's really where we're focused on as a company.
That's good stuff. Definitely want to reiterate, we're going to be taking questions with Matt in just a little bit. Mike will be asking them, so definitely type them in the comments bar. Whatever questions you have for Matt, we'll be taking those questions. Before we get into that, you are a leading expert in millennial generation. Curious of social media, how you look at it. You're pretty big on Twitter. You're pretty good in Twitter. Like, there's good interaction, there's good engagement. I've been trying to work on my Twitter. I mean, what are some of the leading social media things that you see that are coming up? I just joined Clubhouse. That's pretty cool. The voice audio networking group, I guess you call it, or whatever. But, what are you seeing ahead of the curve?
Well, I think it all depends upon what you're trying to accomplish. Obviously, if you're trying to build a business and create connectivity with other business leaders, LinkedIn is the place to be. And on LinkedIn or any other platform, you need to figure out what your differentiated offering is in terms of content you're creating. What is the one thing that you can offer insight on that no one else can? And you need to commit to that one thing, and that needs to be sort of the central pillar to your personal content strategy in terms of what you're posting, how often you're doing it, et cetera. You need to engage with the people you're connected with, liking their posts, commenting on their posts, et cetera. And it's not unlike how you make a powerful physical event. You need to create engagement in the virtual world as well. And I think LinkedIn's a great place to do so. If you're targeting consumers, if you're targeting young consumers, Gen Z, you need to understand how to be on places like TikTok and Snapchat. If you're targeting millennials, and you need to figure out Instagram and how to make sure that you have good visual identity and you're pushing it out. So it really depends on what your business model is, what you're going after. But social media is an incredibly important communication tool for businesses because people are spending more and more time on their phones, and when they're on the phones, they're predominantly in a newsfeed or in a social app. So that's where the eyeballs are, and that's where the attention is. And no matter what business you're in, you need to put your business in the center of where the attention and the eyeballs are.
You laid out a few of them. What about, how do you look at Twitter, though? Where does that fall? Is that just
Twitter right now is a very polarizing place because of everything that's going on in the political landscape. I think Twitter has a lot of great uses for companies, whether it be in customer service, whether it be for pushing content and thought leadership, or one-to-one interaction with people who are important to you, outreaching to people that matter to you, et cetera. So I think it needs to be a part of the mix, but again, it all depends upon the type of business you're in and who your target audience is. I also think paid social media is incredibly important now. As all these social media platforms get continued pressure to make money, now they're making paid front and center, meaning you need to pay to play to really have real reach and scale. And it's important that you understand how to engage in paid social media, how to buy ads, how to target the right people, et cetera. And we do a lot of that at SUZY.
Would you label Facebook under that paid social media aspect of it?
All the platforms, yeah. I mean, Facebook and Instagram run on the same programmatic ad platform because it's owned by the same company. LinkedIn's owned by Microsoft. LinkedIn and Bing have a good programmatic platform. TikTok just rolled out theirs. Snapchat's made many strides in terms of how to target consumers. So, and Twitter has a growing ad platform as well.
Interesting. All right, good stuff. One last question before we get to Mike and the questions. SUZY, the name, this was a question asked by the producer behind the screen. You can't see in the doll. What's the name SUZY? Where did that come from?
So when we were naming the business, we took a look at how people were interacting with technology, with tools like Siri and Alexa, where you are talking to your technology, and the need to be able to humanize technology was something that we thought was going to be a growing trend moving forward. And we love the idea of what if companies could ask SUZY, just like they're asking, ask this tool the same way they're asking their friend a question. SUZY was an ownable name. We were able to buy the URL. It was catchy, and we moved ahead of it. The particular name SUZY came from a song by one of my favorite bands, Fish, called Susie Greenberg, and I was at one of their concerts at Madison Square Garden. They played the song, and then that's when I decided at that moment that we were going to call the company SUZY, because we were looking at a variety of names at that point.
Like a New Year's Eve party at the Garden, possibly. Usually,
Yeah,
a good mindset.
Something like that. Exactly.
Probably would have went with Fee myself. That's my favorite song with Fish.
Oh, nice.
Yes, absolutely. Mike, let's bring in Mike real quick. CEO Entre. Mike, how you doing? Welcome back.
Good. Yeah, just enjoying all these gems that Matt's throwing out here. You remind me actually a lot of Gary Vee in a way. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing in your mind, but
I think Gary's I've known Gary for 20 years. He's a great entrepreneur. No one works harder than him. I have a ton of respect for everything he's done and what he's built.
Yeah, you remind a lot of the stuff that you're saying. It reminds me a lot of him. And like the first question is around, like, where do you really see? I know you were talking about social and stuff, and I agreed with everything that you were saying as far as, like, depending on who you're targeting, where you could play. Where do you think all of this is going, though? I mean, like, if you had to predict, like, where social is going with all the, like, with TikTok coming out and all this short form content, and people being, I don't want to say like necessarily addicted to their phones, but like they're so reliant on technology right now. Do you see this continuing down this direction, and just continuing to increase and like almost very instant content, which is everything's going to become similar to like a TikTok style feed? I'm just curious as far as your thoughts on it, because I think you think a lot about this, I'm assuming. So I'd be curious as to where you think it's going.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, we're not going backwards. So technology is at the center of our lives. The new generation, Gen Z, has their cell phones. I have two kids that are both Gen Z. They're age 13 and 15, and their cell phones are an appendage to their body, and it's really hard to rip them away. And I don't blame them, because that's where all their friends are as well. And especially now in this day and age, they're staring at a screen all day because of school. Now, I do think, especially for younger kids, and younger adults, you need a balance in life. You need to be able to go out in nature. You need to be outside, et cetera. And I think whether you're a parent or you're a boss, that oversees a department, you do need to make sure that people have a balance in their lives, because if you're just consumed with screens and pixels all day, it's not good for your mental health. It's not good for your physical health. But from a business standpoint, we are turning digital. Software is eating the world. From an entertainment and content standpoint, I think that these social media platforms are going to be powering almost everything. You look at Hollywood right now, and the shift is moving away from Hollywood to Silicon Valley. When there's a new program that comes out, or a new documentary or show, it's not going to Universal, it's going to Netflix or Amazon, because they have the big checkbooks and they can basically create these very compelling platforms. It's not all short form. People are consuming short form content and long form content. I think user generated content is here to stay. So platforms like TikTok are showing that consumers love to be creative. They love to showcase themselves and share. And I think from a B2B or advertising standpoint, or even a B2C standpoint, the majority of your money moving forward is going to be going to these social platforms, because you can have incredible ability to target the right person at the right time with the right message in a way that allows you to really measure every dollar of your spending, versus a world where we were 20 years ago, where you would just basically run a TV spot and it's like throwing spaghetti against the wall and hoping it sticks, and towards a very broad audience. So I think these platforms are here to stay, and it's incumbent on any business to fully understand how they work and how you can leverage them.
Yeah, I love it, and that's right along the same lines as I feel like a lot of the stuff I'm hearing from Gary Vee too recently, and I know he spends a lot of time thinking about this, but
yeah, I mean, one thing Gary does a great job at is he's a practitioner. So what you find, and he's always been a practitioner, is that there are a lot of people out there that are thought leaders that talk about these things, but they can't go into the Facebook ads platform and know how to buy an ad. They just don't know the first thing about doing that, right? Gary has always been a practitioner. He's always understood how these things actually work. So when he talks about it, he comes from a place of really knowing what's possible and what's not. And I think that's a big learning lesson, frankly, I probably got from him in the early years is you really have to get in the weeds and understand how these things work. And, I think that's something that a lot of people should follow.
100%. I love that. And thanks for sharing that. The next question is around, mentorship or mentors that you've had. Obviously you mentioned Gary. I'm sure you've had other people who have, helped you with certain aspects of building a business. It's obviously not easy to do, and you have different problems at each stage of as you grow. So are there any mentors or people that you can relate back to, or that you would like sharing, who they are, or more importantly, what they did to help you, along the way, or a piece of advice that you remember from them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important, first of all, if you're an entrepreneur, to have a board of directors very early on. I'm still surprised that so many people that build businesses, even of a substantive size, still don't have a board of directors. And I think there's something important about the forcing function of pulling together your financials every quarter, pulling together your annual goals, getting feedback from people who aren't in the weeds of the business to give you objective outside information. So I think first and foremost, creating a board of director or a board of advisors is incredibly important, and you're never too small to be able to do so. I've also personally got a ton of value out of something called YPO, which is called Young Presidents Organization. We have about 300 people in our New York chapter, but more specifically, I'm part of something called a forum, which is a group of 8 to 10 entrepreneurs who meet on a monthly basis for about 5 hours. And we take turns sharing the challenges we're facing personally and in business. And over time have all become to be very close friends. And having something like that has been incredible for me, because it really has allowed me to share what I'm going through with other people who've gone through the same thing. And if you're an entrepreneur, a lot of the times you're going to have a group of friends that aren't entrepreneurs, and it's hard for them to be able to relate. So having people with relatable experience, even if it's a different industry, I think is incredibly important. Sorry, there's a balloon flying by me because we just hired our 100th employee earlier this week for SUZY, and my team sent me all these balloons, and the helium's running out, and they're just slowly just flying across the room. So that's what you're seeing flying across.
That's great. I was wondering what that was. No, that's awesome. And I think that's huge, and it's literally one of the reasons why I started Entre, was because I was so lonely, on getting into all of this stuff. And I noticed that a lot of entrepreneurs were the same thing. They were just looking for like-minded people just to be around that environment. So really appreciate that. The last question here, and then I'll toss it back over.
One thing I'll add to that is whatever challenge you're facing in business, it's probably not the first time someone's faced that challenge, right? And if you're around other people who have run their own business, there's a good chance that somebody has faced something like it and can share an experience that can help you tackle it. And a lot of people sometimes think they're alone, but a lot of these things have been solved before. Even if it's in a completely different industry, ultimately, a lot of the core tenets of business are just usually repeated over and over again. They may just take different forms in different industries.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And it's super interesting, the questions that, we're seeing on the platform and how people are responding to it and stuff. But it's so important because, there's a lot of ups and downs as entrepreneurs. And
always ups and downs. They're always going to face that.
And especially right now, too, because everyone's stuck in their own rooms or at their house, and they can't literally interact with people. So it's super important. And the last question here before I'll toss it back over to Charlie is question. It's actually about SUZY. So can small startups, or I guess really early stage companies, use SUZY, or is this more for, as companies grow and mature?
It's a lot. We when we first started, we had this SUZY starter package that was a low entry point. But then as the business started to unfold, we realized that our biggest opportunities with large enterprises. So from time to time, we will take on a small business as a customer, but it has to have some type of strategic value for us because we have limited resources as we grow, and we're really just focused on large enterprise customers at this point. But down the line, I could definitely see our product going down market to smaller companies. So I think that's important.
For sure. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and you gotta be careful about who you work with, for sure. There's a couple other questions that are flowing in here. Charlie, I don't know if you want to get to them. I know we're coming up on time here too, so I want to be respectful of that, and we can just reply back to these later on.
Why don't you shoot one over?
I'm good.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we have one here about what you think investors will think of remote teams. So having maybe not met, having had people who may have literally started a company, hired someone remotely, and never even worked with their co-founder or their team, and then going to investors to raise capital.
I don't think it matters. I think that's all about results. What are the unit economics you're building? We've hired 35 people in the last month. I haven't met any of them. We've performed very well remotely. I think that many companies are going to be in that. You have to remember, investors, especially more institutional investors, they've raised money from limited partners, and they need to deploy that capital. And there's very few businesses out there that haven't formed or recently grew in a remote fashion. So you're not unique in that form, and it's kind of just leveled the playing field. And if you've been able to perform well remotely, I think that you would definitely be in demand by investors.
Yeah, this is super helpful. There's a lot to unpack here. You've dropped a lot of gems. We're super appreciative of your time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we end off, words to live by. Do you have any personal mantra or ethos to kind of get people going?
I love the whole notion of done being better than perfect. Just put stuff out there. Don't wait till things are perfect. Don't wait for the perfect time to start a business or to launch your product or to push something out there. Time moves fast, and you don't want to have regrets that you didn't do something because you were waiting for the right time and it never came.
I like that. Done better than perfect. Okay, good. Where can people find you? Matty B on Twitter, right? Where else?
Yeah, Matty B on Twitter is the best place to find me. You can also look me up, Matt Britton, on LinkedIn, or I have a personal website, mattbritton.com. And if you want to learn more about SUZY, go to SUZY.com, SUZY.com.
Awesome. We'll put that all in the bio. We appreciate your time. If you don't mind, just stay on as we drop the feed. But thank you very much.